I used to think Christmas was a time for family, love, and unity, but last year, the holiday exposed the cracks in my life I didn't even know existed. My name's Liam, and this is a story about betrayal, family loyalty, or lack thereof, and a lesson in how karma has its way of balancing the scales. It all started during our family Christmas gathering, which my parents hosted every year. My girlfriend, Emma, had been with me for almost 3 years at that point, and I genuinely thought we were building something meaningful. I was even saving for a ring, hoping that by next Christmas, she'd be my fiancé. My older brother, James, was also at the gathering. James was the golden child, as my parents liked to call him. Handsome, charming, and wildly successful in their eyes, James had always been their favorite. I had grown used to being in his shadow, but I never imagined how far that shadow would stretch. The evening started like any other family holiday. Food, laughter, and reminiscing about old times. Emma fit right in with my family, too well, in hindsight. She'd always been charismatic, and my parents adored her, though maybe not as much as James did. I started noticing the subtle glances between them early in the evening, but I brushed it off. Maybe I was imagining things, I told myself. James was engaged to his longtime fiancée, Megan, who, conveniently, couldn't make it that night due to work obligations. Surely, James wouldn't flirt with Emma. But as the night wore on, those subtle glances turned into something far more obvious. During dinner, James leaned in close to Emma, laughing at her every joke, complimenting her dress, and even casually brushing his hand against hers as he passed her the breadbasket. My blood boiled, but I kept quiet, not wanting to make a scene in front of the family. Instead, I whispered to Emma when James wasn't around, "Is it just me, or is he being overly friendly tonight?" Emma laughed it off. "Liam, you're being paranoid. He's just being James, charming and over the top as usual. You know how he is." I didn't push it. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was overthinking it. Then came the moment that shattered any illusions I had. After dinner, we all gathered around the fireplace for dessert and drinks. I had stepped away to grab some wine from the kitchen when I overheard laughter coming from the living room. Peeking in, I saw James sitting far too close to Emma on the couch, whispering something in her ear that made her laugh and blush. I clenched my fists, willing myself to stay calm. But what sent me over the edge was James casually placing his hand on her knee, his touch lingering far longer than it should have. I stormed into the room, my voice louder than I intended. "What the hell are you doing, James?" The laughter died instantly, and all eyes turned to me. Emma froze, her face a mixture of guilt and confusion. James, of course, played it cool. "Relax, Liam," he said, smirking. "We were just talking." "Talking doesn't involve putting your hand on my girlfriend's knee." I shot back, my anger spilling out unchecked. My parents, always quick to defend their golden boy, jumped in. "Liam, don't ruin the evening," my mom said sharply. "James was just being friendly. Don't be so insecure." "Insecure?" I repeated, incredulous. "He's flirting with Emma right in front of everyone, and I'm supposed to be okay with that?" James shrugged, his smirk never faltering. "You're overreacting, little brother. If your relationship is that fragile, maybe it's not my fault." That was it. I turned to Emma, hoping she'd back me up, but she just sat there, silent and awkward. I felt a crack form in my chest, a seed of doubt I couldn't shake. Was I the crazy one here? Or was Emma not as innocent as she claimed to be? I left the house that night, unable to take another second of the gaslighting and humiliation. Emma didn't follow me. Neither did my parents. And as I drove back to my apartment alone, a bitter realization hit me. I had never really been part of this family, not in the way James was. My parents' loyalty was with him, no matter what. What I didn't realize then was that this was just the beginning. Over the next few months, the betrayal I had felt that night would unravel in ways I could never have imagined. And karma, as they say, would come knocking, though not for me. The morning after the Christmas disaster, I woke up to a flood of missed calls and texts from Emma. I didn't want to read them, but curiosity got the better of me. Most of her messages were attempts to downplay what had happened. "Liam, you're overreacting. James didn't mean anything by it. Can we just move on?" Move on? How could I? My own brother had blatantly disrespected me, and the woman I thought I'd marry had done nothing to stop it. I didn't reply. Instead, I spent the day replaying everything in my head, questioning whether I was being unreasonable. But deep down, I knew the truth. Something wasn't right. Later that day, my mom called. "Liam, we need to talk," she said in her usual no-nonsense tone. When I arrived at my parents' house, I found both of them waiting in the living room, their expressions somber. "What's this about?" I asked, though I already had an idea. "Liam," my dad began, "you can't let one incident ruin your relationship with your brother." "One incident?" I snapped. "He crossed the line with Emma, and you're acting like I'm the problem." "James didn't mean anything by it," my mom interjected. "He's just charming, and you're being too sensitive. You should apologize to him." I stared at them in disbelief. "Apologize? Are you serious? He disrespected me, and you want me to say sorry?" "You're overreacting as usual," my dad said dismissively. "We'd rather not have tension in the family over something so trivial." Their words hit me like a punch to the gut. It was clear they had chosen James. I left the house feeling more isolated than ever, unsure of where I stood with the people who were supposed to have my back. But the worst was yet to come. Little did I know, my brother and Emma weren't done with their betrayal. A few days passed, and the silence between Emma and me grew unbearable. She continued sending messages, insisting I was blowing everything out of proportion, but something about her tone felt off, too defensive, too eager to brush things under the rug. Finally, I caved and agreed to meet her. We sat across from each other in a small cafe, the tension between us palpable. "Liam," she began, her voice calm but rehearsed, "I'm sorry if I made you feel uncomfortable, but honestly, you're taking this way too far. James didn't mean anything." I raised an eyebrow. "Didn't mean anything?" "Emma, he had his hand on your knee. That's not nothing." She sighed, avoiding my gaze. "He's just like that with everyone. You know how your family is. They're touchy, playful. It didn't mean anything." Her dismissiveness only fueled my suspicions. "Why didn't you pull away? Why didn't you tell him to stop?" "I didn't want to make things awkward," she said, her voice rising slightly. "It was a family gathering. What was I supposed to do, cause a scene?" "That's exactly what you should have done," I shot back. "Instead, you sat there and let him flirt with you. Do you even understand how humiliating that was for me?" Emma's expression hardened. "You're overreacting. If you don't trust me, maybe that's your problem, not mine." Her words stung, but they also confirmed what I had been fearing. She wasn't sorry, not really. And deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't telling me the whole truth. Later that night, as I scrolled through social media, I stumbled upon a post that made my heart sink. It was a photo from Christmas, posted by my mom. In the background, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it, was James leaning in close to Emma, whispering something in her ear. Her expression wasn't one of discomfort. It was one of amusement. The image burned into my mind, and the doubt that had been gnawing at me turned into certainty. Something was going on between them, and I was determined to find out what. The next day, I decided to confront James directly. If Emma wasn't going to give me answers, maybe he would. But as I drove to his house, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It read, "You deserve to know the truth about Emma and James. Meet me tomorrow, alone." The mysterious text sent my mind racing. Who would send something like this? And how did they know about Emma and James? I stared at the message, debating whether to reply. Finally, I typed back, "Who is this? What truth?" No response came, leaving me with nothing but questions and an uneasy feeling in the pit of my stomach. Against my better judgment, I decided to follow through. Whoever had sent that text clearly knew something I didn't. The next day, I arrived at the designated meeting spot, a quiet park on the edge of town. I scanned the area, my heart pounding, until a woman approached me. She was familiar, but it took me a moment to place her. "Megan, James's fiancée. You're the one who texted me?" I asked, my voice laced with confusion. "Yes," she said bluntly. "We need to talk." Megan wasted no time getting to the point. "James and Emma," she began, her tone sharp, "have been crossing boundaries for months. I didn't want to believe it at first, but I've seen enough to know something's going on. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. What do you mean? Are you saying they're together? She nodded, her expression grim. I found text between them, nothing too explicit, but enough to raise questions. And I've noticed the way they act around each other. Christmas wasn't the first time he's flirted with her. I think it's been happening for a while. Anger bubbled up inside me. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because I wasn't sure, she admitted. And I thought maybe I was imagining things. But after what happened at Christmas, I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I sat back, trying to process her words. If what she was saying was true, then Emma and James had been betraying us both, right under our noses. What do you want to do about this? Megan asked, her voice cutting through my thoughts. I don't know yet, I admitted, but I'm not letting them get away with it. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every interaction between Emma and James played on a loop in my head, now seen through a lens of suspicion. The laughter, the touches, the glances. It all made sense in the worst possible way. I decided I needed proof, something undeniable that would force the truth into the open. If James and Emma were betraying me, I wasn't going to confront them with nothing but speculation. And so, I started planning how to catch them in the act. Little did I know, the truth would come out sooner than I expected, and in a way I never could have imagined. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions. I avoided Emma's calls and texts, needing space to figure out my next move. Megan and I stayed in touch, comparing notes and piecing together the puzzle of James and Emma's betrayal. The more we talked, the clearer it became. Something was going on, and it wasn't just harmless flirting. Megan suggested setting a trap, something to catch them in the act. At first, I hesitated. Was I really the kind of person who needed to stoop to this level? But the anger and humiliation boiling inside me won out. If they were going to lie to my face, I needed proof to confront them once and for all. We decided to watch their movements closely. Megan, still living with James, noticed he'd been extra secretive lately, taking long phone calls in another room, disappearing for hours without explanation. Meanwhile, Emma claimed she was busy with work, more than usual, a convenient excuse that only added to my suspicions. Then, the break we'd been waiting for came. Megan overheard James on the phone late one night, talking in hushed tones. Friday night, he said. Same place as last time. I'll be there. She texted me immediately. He's meeting someone Friday night. Probably Emma. We need to follow him. When Friday came, Megan and I met up near James's house, staying far enough back to avoid being spotted. Sure enough, James left around 7 p.m., looking far too dressed up for a casual outing. We tailed him to a small, upscale restaurant on the other side of town. My stomach churned as we watched him walk inside, and moments later, Emma appeared. They greeted each other with a hug that lingered a little too long before sitting down at a secluded corner table. I couldn't hear their conversation, but their body language told me everything I needed to know. They leaned in close, laughing and smiling like they didn't have a care in the world, like they weren't betraying the people who trusted them. I felt a white-hot rage build inside me. That's it, I said through gritted teeth, starting to move toward the door. Megan grabbed my arm. Wait, she said firmly. You don't want to make a scene here. Let's get photos, proof. Then you can confront them. She was right. As much as I wanted to storm in and flip the table, I knew it wouldn't solve anything. I snapped a few photos on my phone, each one more damning than the last. When I had what I needed, we left, our silence heavy with the weight of what we just witnessed. That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at the photos, unsure what to do next. Confronting Emma and James would blow everything up, not just my relationship with Emma, but my already fragile connection with my family. But the alternative was staying silent, pretending I didn't know, and I couldn't live like that. The decision was made for me the next morning when Emma showed up unannounced, her expression a mix of frustration and concern. We need to talk, she said, walking past me into the apartment. I closed the door behind her, my anger barely contained. Yeah, we do. She opened her mouth to speak, but I cut her off, holding up my phone. Before you say anything, care to explain this? Her face went pale as she looked at the photos, her confident demeanor crumbling. Liam, It's not what it looks like, she stammered. Don't insult me, I snapped. I followed you, Emma. I saw you with James. How long has this been going on? She hesitated, her silence confirming everything. It was a mistake, she finally said. I didn't mean for it to happen. A mistake? I repeated, my voice rising. You don't accidentally meet someone at a restaurant and act like a couple. How long? Just a few weeks, she admitted, tears streaming down her face. Liam, I'm sorry. I didn't want to hurt you. You didn't want to hurt me? I said, laughing bitterly. Then maybe don't cheat with my brother. Before she could respond, I opened the door. Get out. Emma looked at me, her tears falling faster. Liam, get out. She left, and as the door closed behind her, I felt an odd mix of anger, heartbreak, and relief. The truth was out, and now I could finally start dealing with the fallout. But the hardest part was yet to come, confronting my family. The day after Emma left, I knew what had to be done. I couldn't let James walk away from this unscathed, not after what he'd done. But confronting him meant facing my parents too, and I dreaded their inevitable defense of their golden boy. I called a family meeting at my parents' house. When I arrived, James was already there, lounging on the couch like he didn't have a care in the world. My parents sat nearby, their faces puzzled. What's this about? My dad asked. I wasted no time. James has been having an affair with Emma. The room fell silent, my parents' shock slowly giving way to disbelief. James, however, didn't flinch. Instead, he smirked. Is that what she told you? I pulled out my phone and showed them the photos I'd taken at the restaurant. My mom gasped, and my dad's jaw tightened. How could you do this? I demanded, turning to James. You betrayed me, your own brother. James shrugged. It wasn't serious. She came to me. Don't act like I stole her. His casual dismissal sent my blood boiling. You crossed the line, James. You ruined everything. Before I could say more, my mom jumped in. Liam, maybe this isn't as bad as it seems. Emma's the one who's to blame here. Are you kidding me? I said, my voice rising. He's just as guilty, and you're defending him? We're not choosing sides, my dad said firmly. But you need to calm down. Not choosing sides? I laughed bitterly. You always choose James. No matter what he does, you excuse it. James leaned back, smug as ever. Maybe you should take this as a lesson, little brother. If Emma wasn't loyal to you, that's on you. That was the final straw. I'm done, I said, standing. With you, with Emma, and with this family. I walked out, slamming the door behind me, leaving their protest behind. For the first time in my life, I realized I was better off without them. Walking out of my parents' house felt both liberating and devastating. For years, I had tolerated being the second-best son, the one constantly overshadowed by James's charm and their blind loyalty to him. But now, I couldn't ignore the betrayal. Not just from James, but from my parents, who once again stood by him despite the damage he caused. Over the next few days, I stayed silent. No calls, no texts. I ignored Emma's attempts to reach out, and I refused to answer any messages from my parents. I needed space to think and heal, even if it meant severing ties completely. Then, one evening, Megan called. Liam, you're not going to believe this, she said, her voice shaking with a mix of anger and disbelief. What happened? I asked, bracing myself. James proposed to Emma, she said bitterly. He ended things with me and said he's starting fresh with her. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. As much as I hated to admit it, I wasn't surprised. James had always been shameless, taking whatever he wanted without a second thought for the consequences. Still, hearing that they were moving forward with their relationship stung more than I expected. You deserve better than him, I said to Megan, meaning it. We both do. She sighed. I just can't believe how easily he discarded everything we had. But you know what? Maybe this is a blessing in disguise. At least I see him for who he really is now. Her words resonated with me. Maybe this whole mess, as painful as it was an opportunity to let go of the toxic relationships that had held me back for so long. I decided it was time to make my break official. I blocked Emma and James on every platform and sent a final message to my parents. If you can't hold James accountable for his actions, I can't be part of this family anymore. I need to move on. Their response was predictable. More excuses, more attempts to smooth things over without addressing the real issue. But I didn't reply. For the first time, I put myself first. What I didn't realize was that karma was already in motion, and James's actions were about to catch up with him in a way none of us saw coming. A few weeks passed in silence. I focused on myself, my work, my friends, and rebuilding the confidence that had been shattered by James and Emma's betrayal. Cutting ties with my family had been painful, but it was also freeing. For the first time, I wasn't living under the shadow of James's golden boy persona. Then, one day, Megan called again. Her voice was laced with satisfaction. "You're going to want to hear this," she said. "What's going on?" I asked, curious but cautious. "It's about James and Emma," she said, barely hiding a chuckle. "They're already falling apart." Apparently, James's charm and Emma's flattery hadn't been enough to sustain their new relationship. According to Megan, they had moved in together shortly after James broke things off with her. But the honeymoon phase hadn't lasted long. Emma's insecurities and James's wandering created a toxic dynamic that spiraled out of control. "They had a huge fight at a restaurant the other night," Megan continued. "Emma accused him of flirting with the waitress, and James told her she was just jealous and clingy. People were recording them. It's all over social media." I couldn't help but laugh. It was poetic justice, really. James and Emma had built their relationship on lies and betrayal, and now it was crumbling under its own weight. But the cherry on top came a few days later. I received an email from my parents, begging me to come back to the family. "We made a mistake," they admitted. "James isn't the person we thought he was. Can we talk?" It turned out James had hit rock bottom. After burning bridges with me, Megan, and now Emma, his reputation at work had also taken a hit. Rumors of his unprofessional behavior and inflated ego had reached his boss, and he was demoted, a devastating blow for someone who thrived on status and validation. I read my parents' message carefully, but I didn't reply. Their sudden change of heart wasn't about me. It was about James no longer being the perfect son they'd put on a pedestal. They didn't deserve my forgiveness, not yet, anyway. As for James and Emma, I heard through the grapevine that their relationship ended shortly after the public meltdown. Emma moved back to her hometown, and James was left to pick up the pieces of his shattered life. Karma had done its job, and for the first time in a long while, I felt at peace. I didn't need to seek revenge or force accountability. Life had a way of handling that on its own. And as I moved forward, I realized the best thing I could do was let go of the past and focus on building a future where I surrounded myself with people who truly valued me. A month passed after I sent that final message to my parents. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to look back. Cutting them off had been difficult, but it also brought clarity. I no longer felt like I had to compete for their approval or put up with their blatant favoritism toward James. My focus was on moving forward, rebuilding my life without the weight of their judgment. But as much as I tried to leave it all behind, karma had a way of keeping me in the loop. One evening, while scrolling through social media, I stumbled upon a video that immediately grabbed my attention. It showed James and Emma in the middle of a heated argument at a fancy restaurant. The captions painted a clear picture. Couple's fight goes viral. Accusations of cheating fly. I clicked the video, unable to stop myself. There they were, James with his smug, dismissive attitude, and Emma on the verge of tears, shouting about betrayal. "You're just like every other man," she yelled. "You can't keep your eyes off anyone else." James, ever the charmer, laughed mockingly. "Maybe if you weren't so insecure, you'd realize I'm doing you a favor by even being here." The video cut off as the waiter awkwardly intervened, but the damage was done. The comment section was a goldmine of ridicule, with strangers gleefully tearing James apart for his arrogance. I couldn't help but smirk. James and Emma had built their relationship on lies and betrayal, and now they were reaping what they'd sown. The next day, my phone buzzed with a call from my mom. I hesitated before answering, curiosity getting the better of me. "Liam," she said, her voice unusually soft. "Can we talk?" "Why?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. It's about James, she said with a sigh. Things aren't going well for him. Apparently, the viral video had done more than embarrass James. It had exposed his true nature to everyone around him. His colleagues, once enamored by his charm, were now questioning his integrity. His boss had demoted him after rumors of unprofessional behavior surfaced. Even Emma had left him, packing her bags and disappearing without a word. He's struggling, my mom said, and we realize now that we made mistakes. Choosing James over you was wrong. We see that now. Her words stirred something in me, but it wasn't forgiveness, at least not yet. I'm glad you finally see it, I said, but it's too late to fix what's broken. We just want our family back, she pleaded. I took a deep breath, letting her words sink in. For years, I had craved this acknowledgement, this apology. But now that I had it, it felt hollow. They hadn't changed because they wanted to. They'd changed because James had let them down. I'll think about it, I said finally, before hanging up. As I put my phone down, I felt a strange sense of closure. For the first time, I wasn't chasing their approval. I didn't need it anymore. And while they dealt with the fallout of their choices, I focused on the future, knowing that I'd finally taken back control of my life. Weeks turned into months, and life began to settle into something resembling peace. Without the constant drama of my family, James, and Emma, I found myself rediscovering who I was without their influence. For the first time, I wasn't walking on eggshells or trying to earn anyone's approval. I was free. My parents continued to reach out sporadically, each message more apologetic than the last. They wanted reconciliation, but I wasn't ready to open that door. I had spent years being the overlooked son, the second choice, while James basked in their unconditional support. It wasn't a grudge. I just needed more time to heal. One day, while I was at work, I received a surprising email from Megan. Since our last conversation, she had thrown herself into her own journey of moving forward. The email contained a link to an article, Former Corporate Star James Falls from Grace, Scandals and Setbacks. Curiosity got the better of me, and I clicked the link. The article detailed how James's demotion had turned into a full-blown spiral. His reckless behavior at work and in his personal life had burned bridges everywhere. His once bright future was now a shadow of what it had been. As satisfying as it was to see karma take its course, it didn't bring me the joy I thought it might. Instead, it cemented my belief that walking away had been the right decision. That same week, I ran into Megan at a local cafe. We caught up, sharing stories of how we had moved on from the mess James and Emma had left in our lives. It's funny, Megan said with a small smile. I thought losing him would break me, but it ended up being the best thing that ever happened. I nodded. Same here. I feel like I can finally breathe. As we talked, I realized how much we had both grown. We had been collateral damage in James and Emma's selfishness, but we had come out stronger. By the time we said goodbye, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't expected. Later that evening, I sat on my couch, reflecting on everything that had happened. James and Emma were gone from my life, and while my relationship with my parents remained fractured, I no longer felt the need to fix it. I had found peace in walking away. But the most important lesson I had learned was this. I didn't need anyone else's approval to feel whole. My worth wasn't determined by my family, my brother, or a failed relationship. It came from within. As I looked out the window at the setting sun, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. My life wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and that was enough.